The Stygian Rose is the third full-length album from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania-based doom metal or epic heavy metal band Crypt Sermon. And epic heavy doom metal is probably the best way to put it. This is much more of a straightforward heavy metal record than their past releases, but it remains a mid to slow pace and a dramatic timbre that fits very well in the realm of epic doom metal. There are some traditional heavy rock and heavy metal distinctions to be made there, but it is a remarkable shift in terms of a much more accessible render, a much more clear, dynamic approach to everything, and much catchier songs, and much more guitar technique and hooks written into each of the pieces. So every song here counts, and it is up front. It is probably one of their better records to approach, depending on what you want out of Crypt Sermon album. For me, I've been there since they started, and with Out of the Garden, it was clear that they were worshiping Candlemas, from the look of the record to the sound of the record and its heavily reverb drenched sound and all the effects on the vocals. It was clear that they were punching above their weight, for the sake of creating something that was very distinctly atmospheric and distinctly epic doom metal, and in a very traditional style. Now, it wasn't a particularly derivative album. The songwriting and their hand in it was very clear in its own voice, from the start, and I was a huge fan of that record back in 2015, and they carried on. It took several years, but they put out a second record, which is The Ruins of Fading Light. It received a ton of hype. I think that it was just better promoted. It was bigger on the larger publications at the time. It was still written by the same team that had written the first record, so it felt very related. They seemed to be changing the production value slightly with Arthur Rizek, and what it led to was a record that was more dynamic. It was catchier. It was a little bit more of the same, but it was also obviously a sophomore record in that it was pushing beyond its own, its influences and into its own, as a record should in that style. But it was clear that there were still naive aspects of what they were doing. There were still derivative aspects of what they were doing, and I think that this third record does what it can to address that and try to shoot for a bigger stature, because a lot of their peers are on major label records, or they're putting out major label records, and they've moved on in the years past, and this band seems to be striking at that same level of quality. So let's cut to a song here and get an example of what really what the essence of Crypt Sermon is in just a few seconds. While we could point to Solitude Aeternus and Candlemas, and kind of a general sense of just what this band takes from, we're many generations beyond those groups, and I don't think that their direct influence is as profound as even something like Dio. If we look to Argus and Wheel for their dramatic vocal styles and the way that they take influence from much more classic heavy metal from the early 80s and late 70s, we find that a lot of that is happening with Crypt Sermon here on this record, where we get more dramatic vocal melodies. We get expression that is much more from the chest in terms of the singing and less enhanced by vocal effects and things like that. I think that epic doom metal has a problem where they pile so many effects onto the vocals that it almost illegitimizes the where the talent of the vocalist is at in time and space. It adds something false to it where it's not necessarily needed. But I think that the vocalist is good enough at this point where a lot of the extra echo and fluff and all that doesn't really add a lot to a record that is already sonically lustrous and has plenty of effects pumped into the every other channel. In that sense, they've improved in every way for this record, but it does find them still resonating in the rafters rather than up front on the stage. And I think that's the big thing that I didn't feel with this record. Was it doesn't feel like they're fully taking the stage and taking command so much as starting to get their taking larger steps toward a big, outsized, upfront personality. And I think they're just about ready for it. It doesn't stop me from loving this record. I'm a big fan of epic heavy metal and doom metal, and the way those things play off each other in the classic 80s heavy metal style. And so everything about this record is very much my thing, and I think their songwriting is exceptional. I think just looking at this record, I can remember the hook and the chorus for Scrying Orb. It's stuck in my head right now just thinking about it. And most every song on here, I just look at the song title, I remember that hook, I remember that vocal touch, I remember that solo. There's something intense and intensely written and authored about this record. For me, this is very much an above average record. It does get a very high recommendation from me. I think the personal touch of the album art and the design of the whole thing adds a lot to it. But also the songwriting is the most important thing here. And without the performances that carry it so hard through, it might have just been an average doom metal record. And I think they really showed something above average here, and that should be celebrated. This released on June 14th. Go ahead and check it out yourself and read my review if you'd like more of my thoughts on the details of this record.